All right, got my hat here that you can see to some degree. So sorry, my camera's not working that great, but I will go ahead and start us off. All right. Well, hello everyone. I'm so excited to talk to all of you today about the Taoism of Tom Bombadil. My name is Tom Martin, no relation to the Bombadil, but I'm gonna give them some shout out to my namesake. So what I want to do is apply Taoist philosophy to Middle Earth's what is the most enigmatic figure in a lot of ways. Now, when we think of Tom Bombadil, one thing that's always interesting for me is Tom Bombadil kind of gets the shaft a little bit. This is by far my favorite action figure. I found this on Etsy. I love this. I think this is just gold. You think about Peter Jackson, and all of us would have probably loved to have Tom Bombadil on screen. It just would have been incredible. But can you imagine your non-Tolkien friends looking over at you and going, "Who the hell is this? What is going on?" So again, it makes some sense, but unfortunately, again, I think Tom Bombadil sometimes gets pushed to the wayside. What's interesting is that even Tolkien himself, put in letter 153 to Peter Hastings, a lot of comments on Tom Bombadil and a lot of different things. But he says, Tom doesn't need a lot of thinking about. He kind of put him in as kind of a mini adventure, which is kind of sad, right? But down below, he says, well, Tom he represents certain things otherwise left out, a spirit that desires knowledge of other things, entirely unconcerned with doing anything with the knowledge. Well, I don't know about you, but that sounds like he has given some thought to it. So I still think it's fair game to consider Tom Bombadil and a Taoist framework. So what I want to do is first off talk about Taoism in general. I don't mean to insult anyone's intelligence on this, but want to make sure we have a good groundwork on Taoism and some of the main tenets. Then going through what I'm calling Bombadisms, which is taking some Taoist thought and comparing them to Bombadil and some things that were said by him and about him. And then really looking at three main major concepts when it comes to Taoism. One is Wu Wei and J.R.R, which is inaction, but action. We'll talk about that. The Taijitu here, the yin yang symbol, probably the most famous representation of Taoism. But looking at this from the yin and yang, the female and male side, being completely embedded within Tom himself. Yes, the easy answer is with Goldberry and Tom, of course, but we're going to just focus on Tom Bombadil. And then finally, water. How is this tied with Tom and also Taoism? So the things that we're going to do here for this perspective is first and foremost is, again, The Lord of the Rings is the primary text, of course. The poem will be alluded to, but is not going to be discussed in great detail. Obviously, Taoist concepts. I'm not bringing in any histories of Middle Earth. If you've got questions about it, of course, I've gone through the awesome Signum Space classes that they've offered this year for histories of MA, so happy to talk about it. And I'm not going to go into too much granularity on the Taoist sects. As we'll see, there's a lot out there. There's a lot of different schools of thought, and we're really going to look at Taoism kind of at the highest level, but there are a few sects that we will talk about. For those of fans of Ursula K. Le Guin, she is also a big proponent of Taoism. I love this. She starts out her translation saying, hey, nothing's certain about it, but it's Chinese, it's old, and it has a lot of applicability to today, which is really cool. And it's still obviously practiced in many parts of the world. And as I was saying, there are no heretics in Taoism, just multiple sects. But we obviously are not going to go through those in a lot of granularity. Now, we talk about Taoism in general. The one primary text that comes up is the Tao Te Ching. Now, this is attributed to Lao Tzu. You also can read about Zhuangzi. Zhuangzi is another very famous individual who has written a lot of Taoist thoughts. But both of these individuals steeped in mystery 2,000 years ago during the Warring States period. So a lot of turbulence, a lot of things that were happening at the time. And Lao Tzu, we don't even know if it was a real guy. His name means old man or old sage. So again, was this person even real? But when we look at the Tao Te Ching as the primary text, Tao is translated to the way or the path. Really what it's pointing to is this ultimate principle of the fundamental nature of the universe, this primordial energy that underlines and sustains everything. Day is virtue or power, and points to someone being in harmony with Taoism. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then finally, Qing is attributed to scripture. So really what the Tao Te Ching translates to is the classic of the way and virtue. And obviously there are many translations of the Tao Te Ching. Le Guin, again, chapter 25 is a famous Taoism verse because it goes into a description of really what is Taoism and what's happening here. But again, to reiterate, it contains everything. It's before heaven and earth. I wanted to go down one track. Well, is the Idolindale technically Taoism? I think one can make an argument that it really is the undercurrent of the universe. It's the mother of all things. People call it the way, and they even call it great. And you can obviously read the scripture in more detail and the subsequents that add additional understanding of Taoism. Now, virtue is not necessarily moral virtue. It's not saying, hey, that's a virtuous person. That person's honest and hardworking, that type of thing. In Taoism, what it means is that your character is so in tune with the Tao, in such harmony, that you're natural, you're spontaneous, you're authentic. You are so aligned with Taoism that you really even can't tell the two apart because you're that plugged in. Now, as I was saying, again, three really primary tenets on Taoism. It underlines and fuels everything, just like water. One of the famous chapter 8 of the Tao Te Ching talking about water that we'll go over. Again, opposites that emerge and collaborate with yin and yang, the male and the female side. And then finally, Tao doesn't act, which is really kind of strange, but it does act. And we'll explore that a little bit more. What's interesting is when we start to see in The Lord of the Rings where the hobbits are interacting with Tom, you can start to see this Taoism really start to influence them. They started to sing more than they started to talk because it seemed more natural. They were having fun with it with Tom. And I love how Shippey says that a lot of what Tom's saying is really nonsense. I mean, Tom Bombadillo, Dillo, wow, he's dancing around and singing these nonsensical phrases. But to Shippey's point, maybe it's just an ancient language that, we're not plugged into. There were comments that were made that, Saruman and Gandalf, they need a staff, not Tom Bombadil. He's more plugged into this natural energy than anyone in Middle Earth. Well, let's talk about some Bombadisms. Now, Bombadil first appeared in a 1934 Oxford magazine. And again, going back to Shippey, I love this quote. Can you imagine picking up The Adventures of Tom Bombadil and reading it without any context? I mean, it must have just been nonsensical to people that were reading it, but still a fun poem. Tom is dodging badgers. He's dodging a river ferry. He's got a white that shows up in his house. So there's a lot going on. And you could say, hey, did Sam Gamgee maybe write these in the past, or some other hobbit that read the Red Book of Westmarch? Maybe. But still, again, we're just going to focus on more, obviously, the Lord of the Rings. When Frodo asks Tom who he is, you've got to love this answer from Tom. He's eldest. That's what I am. I remember the first raindrop, the first acorn. So he remembers Arda Unmarred. Now, what is he exactly? Well, it's never really said. We know he's not a Valar. At least he wasn't counted in that in any of the Silmarillion. Is he an Ainur Maya? Maybe. Robert Foster's Guide to Middle Earth calls him a Maya gone rogue, and that's probably the best answer at this point. Definitely not one of the free peoples, and definitely plugged into more the cosmological beginning that we all know and love as Ainulindale. But as for Tom Bombadil, I love this. He's not God. Peter Hastings, in the same letter 153, had asked that outright. Is this a manifestation of God? And that's where Tolkien's, you're taking this too seriously. But he is absolutely not Eru in Tolkien's interpretation. Well, how does this align to Taoism? Well, we see that Tom has been really here at the beginning. Zhuangzi said, heaven and earth were born when I was born. Now, Zhuangzi is not saying that he is an immortal, though he is included in the immortals. What he's saying is that his consciousness began and he was aware of heaven and earth, very similar to Tom. Again, in the spirit of that, their consciousness was aware at the beginning of time. Again, we're talking about folks that are plugged into this primordial energy. Goldberry calls him a master. And what's interesting is Tolkien comes back and says, he's not the owner of the woods. He wouldn't make, and I love this word, such a threat. But Tom is master. He has no fear, no desire of possession or domination at all. And that will come up a little bit later as well. One of the interesting things, there was a sage who was consulting with a ruler, and the ruler had two brothers that just were wastrels. And his country that he was running was doing really well. And he asked the sage, how can I have my country running so well, but I can't get my brothers under control? And the sage says, how crazy. Just because you can run a country doesn't mean you can just dominate people to your will, like a Sauron in a sense. So same thing here. Tom is not here to dominate. He's not control. He's simply so plugged into Taoism that he's master of himself. And then finally, as he's leaving the hobbits, sending them on to the Barrow Downs, obviously they want him to come with him, but he says, listen, this is my realm. This is as far as I go, acknowledging Mordor, acknowledging that he doesn't have that much power out in that direction. Same thing with Taoists. They're looking at things and saying, look, we're not going to be reckless. Of course, we can die from old age, we can die from illness, accident, but we don't run into it saying, hey, Tao is going to save me, so I'm completely oblivious. No, the Taoists don't think that, and neither did Tom. I love this from Lord of the Rings Online for my fellow players. You got Buff Tom running to go help the hobbits. Obviously, that isn't what happened. The concepts of Wu Wei and J.R.R. really kind of go back and forth. Wu Wei is, instead of being this lazy attempt to do anything, it's action with inaction, because you're taking action that's effortless, that's spontaneous, and that aligns with the Tao. Same thing with J.R.R. It's a naturalness, a self-so, a spontaneity. So again, you're acting, but it seems that you're not acting, because again, you're natural and authentic with the world around you. So here are three instances when we're talking about Wu Wei and J.R.R. First is his encounter with Old Man Willow. It's a natural encounter. Frodo and Sam start a fire to try and save Merry and Pippin, but that only makes Old Man Willow even more irritated. Tom comes over and he sings to Willow. He doesn't take an axe and say, man, I'm done with this stupid tree, or hey, let's get that fire over. I'm just done with this nonsense. No, he respects Old Man Willow. Tolkien even said that he gets irritated when people try to align Old Man Willow to Sauron, saying, there are other things other than the devil that can come after you. Old Man Willow is one of them. So again, yeah, he does take a branch and jolt and hit Old Man Willow, but he's not doing this out of any kind of malice. Again, he respects Willow, respects who that entity is, and to be in doubt, he's not going to destroy him. It's an interesting story by Zhuangzi. He's walking in a mountain path, and he comes across a woodcutter. And the woodcutter's staring at this tree, and Zhuangzi says, hey, why are you staring at this tree? And the woodcutter looks at it and says, this tree is useless. I can't use any of this wood. And Zhuangzi says, wow, the tree's uselessness means it will live its entire life with Tao. How amazing. So an interesting attitude, and one Tom would agree with. One of the most dramatic instances is Tom becomes a ring bearer. He asks to hold the ring, whereas Gandalf, complete aversion, Galadriel, she's tempted, but no. He says, hey, hand it to me. The ring has absolutely no power over him whatsoever. It does grow in his hand, but he doesn't turn invisible. He makes light of it, but we'll talk about that at the end. But in the end, he knows what this is, but his willpower is so beyond any of the free peoples, even the wizards and the emissaries. Tom can't be touched with this, and the ring knows that, because he is so true to himself, and he's not interested in possessing or domination. And then finally with the White. The White is almost an antithesis of Tom Bombadil's songs, where Tom's songs are cheerful and happy. The incantation that the White has is dreary and about death and destruction, but he comes in and he sings exorcism. Again, singing. He doesn't attack the White. He doesn't punch the White in the head, take a sword and stab it. He sings it and dissolves it away. And a lot of Taoistic magical practices, there are many verbal talismans, dances, songs, hand mudras that must be used to dissolve and destroy bad spirits. Again, Tom, through Taoism, is attacking this through song and not physical action. In a sense, a pacifist approach. He's still saving the hobbits, but he's not overtly attacking these creatures. We talk about yin yang again, just to reiterate, yin, the shaded side, is female. It's receptivity, flexibility, softness. The yang side, strength, initiative, and male. I didn't write it. 2,000 years ago, they did. You can blame them, but that's the Tai Chi too, which is the most famous in Taoism. So how does really Tom have both of these really kind of connections, right? Well, he supplies baths, meals, beds. He really serves as a host, almost outperforming Goldberry, what might almost be her kind of role, right, as a female in this type of society. But no, Tom takes care of the Hobbit's needs much more than she does. Think about his songs. His songs are powerful. He shows strength. Again, Taoism is not purely pacifist. In fact, Sun Tzu's Art of War is founded on many Taoist principles. So there's a lot going on here, but we see both the female and the male side from songs and from his hosting duties in Tom Bombadil. So he is both sides of this for yin and yang. And then finally, with water, chapter 8 is a very famous scripture in the Tao Te Ching. The supreme good is like water, which nourishes all things without trying to. Isn't that a beautiful sentiment? But as it goes through, it shows that it keeps simple. It's generous. It doesn't try to control. Do what you enjoy. All water. So then how does Tom connect to water? Well, he said, I'm no weather master, and he isn't. But Taoism did have ancient shamans who could sing rain clouds or could coax a deity to bring rain. No, we don't see Tom doing that, but we do see him interact with water. First, you see him, he's waving his arms about outside, where he calls it Goldberry's washing day. The hobbits are very happy to be able to stay at his home for rain. He waves his arms around almost as if he is dancing through the raindrops. Now, yeah, he could have sang a song, he could have got Goldberry, get these things out of here. You know, I don't want rain anymore. But he didn't. No, it's fine. Spontaneous, I'll deal with it. But clearly he has some control over water. Again, baths for the hobbits, that was his primary job of getting that for them. And the water that they even serve the hobbits is like wine. In fact, it lifts their spirits, it makes them happy and sing. So purely, this is some good water. This is some control over this element that he has. And then finally, as he's going back to his home, the river actually leaps up to meet him. It leaps up with joy. You can see it glints in the starlight. So the river itself is very happy to see Tom. What's interesting, if you contrast that with Elrond, Elrond dominates the fort of Bruin, and it's a domination of his land. He forces the river to take action, whereas Tom doesn't do that. He would just maybe even talk to the river and it would do it, and it needed it too. But it's interesting that the various contrasts there. So Tom the Taoist monk, you know, a lot of his thought aligns to Taoist thought as well. You could say Bombadisms and Taoism, they really do interact. Wu Wei and J.R.R, again, his action in action with Old Man Willow and with the White, again, showing that he's not overtly attacking, he's being spontaneous and authentic in his way. With Yin Yang, we just saw two examples. The paper has more, only had 20 minutes, but he does demonstrate both feminine and masculine power. And then finally, we see water, a very key element in Taoism, being something that also aligns to Tom Bombadil. So thank you for that. Sorry for all the information and rushing through it, but I appreciate your attention.
Thank you very much, Tom. Let's have some applause and some appreciation for that delightful tour through the spiritual world of Taoism and its resonances with our good friend Tom Bombadil. And I really appreciate sort of the way in which the notion of the Tao provides an interpretive tool for making sense of Tom Bombadil on this mystery that he represents in the sort of cosmology of Middle Earth. So we've got a couple questions in the chat from folks, and if you have questions, please do drop those in the Q&A, and that's where I can see them and pass them on to our panelists. And we've got a couple of questions, which I'm going to synthesize as what do you think of the sort of interpretation that reads Tom and also Goldberry, his wife, as nature spirits or manifestations of nature their area. One of our questioners says it would explain why the ring has no power over them and why they are not interested in anything outside their realm. Do you think this theory would work with your Taoist interpretation of Tom?
Absolutely. That was one of the first things I had gone through the letters and seen that with the nature spirits. God, that's really intriguing. I think it goes back to what is Tom? Is he a Maya? Is he what exactly is he? We still really don't know. He doesn't show up in any kind of the early histories of Middle Earth that in the Silmarillion you really don't see him. Now he has various names that elves, men, dwarves, they've run across him before. But yeah, I think that interpretation works perfectly fine. Even with Goldberry being a nature spirit, I think they're just so in tune with nature that they're almost nature kind of anthropomorphized in a way. I think that aligns perfectly to Taoism.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. Alexandra asks a somewhat similar, although also distinct question, which is, what do you think of the theory that Tom and Goldberry sort of represent humans with no sin? Does this align with Taoism? Obviously, Taoism is a very different sort of perspective on the original goodness and or sinfulness of the human being.
Yeah, I mean, it's, Taoism, like I said, doesn't have any type of moral virtue. It's not going to outline you must do this, you must do that. Really, it's only thing it's telling you is that you must align to the Taoism. If you go against Taoism, this is the one thing it says that that's unvirtuous. Like the white, for example, that is a good almost apostasy against Taoism. It's just such an antithesis of what's natural. So I would say yes. I mean, as long as you are working in your natural state, you're not harming anyone, you're taking a much more pacifist approach, then yes, I think it comes across. Now, does that mean that sin doesn't exist? I don't necessarily think so. I think that the immortals are perfect in their understanding of Taoism, but could we interpret or misinterpret something they do wrong? Sure, but I don't think it's necessarily a focus on being sinful or not sinful.
Thank you for that, Tom. Well, as I was listening to your presentation, I appreciated you bringing up Ursula Le Guin, who is, of course, one of our in her translation of the Tao and also in her use of Taoist ideas in books like A Wizard of Earthsea. Um, and I was curious if you wanted to share a little bit about what brought you to Taoism as a tradition. Were you
Yeah,
raised in it, or is that something you found your way to later in life?
definitely later in life. It's funny you say that. I was telling my wife the other day, in the chapter 8 that we read on water. I read that in college in Anthropology 101, and it blew me away. Dr. Rashford's still one of my favorite professors for bringing that forward. I think the concept was just so awesome and so just open that there's something bigger than us, and we can't quite define it, but just live your best self and be your best self, I think is a great message. Now, Taoist sects are all over the place. Some are, of course, a lot more pacifist. Some you can't eat meat. Some you can't, there's certain other restrictions in your life. But Taoism as a whole, I think, is just such a beautiful religion. It doesn't judge. It doesn't dictate. It basically just says, look, just live your best self, and you'll align to this universal concept. So I think all of that just makes it attractive.